Hello, all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are going to be reviewing the film The Bride! Which feels very necessary, that exclamation point. And we are joined by a very special guest. She is just an absolute joy, a delight, a shining beacon of light. Sara Shea is back to talk about The Bride with us.
Hello.
Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh my gosh. Hi, I'm Sara Shea from Shea Cinema. I'm so delighted to be back to talk about this movie on the heels several months later of us talking about Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. And I'm just so jazzed. I have goosebumpies. I'm so excited. So thank you for having me back.
Oh, we are so lucky. Thank you for joining. Honestly, I was thinking about that while watching this movie. I was like, this is kind of perfect because we just talked about the Frankenstein story from Guillermo del Toro's interpretation, which is very different, night and day, I think, with what we got here. So, Sarah Callan, do you want to kick us off with an IMDb summary for The Bride?
In 1930s Chicago, Frankenstein asks Dr. Euphronius to help create a companion. They give life to a murdered woman as the bride, sparking romance, police interest, and radical social change.
Man, yeah. One sentence summaries in Movies and Us tradition. Sara Shea, would you like to share yours first?
I wrote another haiku.
Yes.
I thought you might be excited.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not going to bother counting it out. You guys can count it out at home. But sex and love and rage, violence and loneliness, Maggie got it right.
Ooh. Wow. Yes, I was feeling the syllables in my head.
Yeah.
All right, and kind of a peek into perhaps where you landed on how The Bride landed for you. So that was a good little trailer.
Maybe.
Yes. Okay, Sarah, your one sentence summary for The Bride.
Mine is the tragedy of having a heart that longs to dance and a face destined to crime.
Well done.
He's got a face made for radio. Isn't that the phrase?
Right.
My one sentence summary is more simple. It's one of the characters, he shouts it, the dead are angry.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's dive in. We're going to share our high-level thoughts about The Bride and kind of where we landed on the temperature spectrum. Are we like, yes, this totally rocks? Or, I don't know. I walked to the theater and I had to process a lot. So, Sarah, you kind of gave it away a little bit. Maggie did it right, or I think, yes, Maggie got it right. Thoughts on The Bride? How did this land for you?
So I feel like this movie is so chaotic, and that is sort of what I think that's really the vibes that Maggie Gyllenhaal is going for. And this is not to necessarily pit it against Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. They're telling different stories, but I was so fascinated by it. And I think in terms of telling a new story with familiar material, that's really how I feel like she got it right. And it's not even necessarily, did I love this movie? It's just, this is brand new, using so many familiar things, so many familiar tropes. This movie is a love letter to all of cinema history. And it feels like it was right in my wheelhouse because of that. There are so many references to other films, this time period in history, throwaway lines that people aren't necessarily even going to understand the references unless they're really obsessive about this type of stuff like I am. And so I felt a little bit special, like, ooh, I feel like this was made for me, but that's so pretentious, right? But without really giving too much away, this story did not go where I thought it was going to go. And I feel like I'm so familiar with what it's based on, and it took a complete turn away. And so I was genuinely surprised by things that were going on. I think it is a little bit messy, and I did have some problems with it, which we can get into. But overall, I was entertained. I enjoyed it, and I thought it was lovely to look at in a completely different way than Frankenstein was lovely to look at, even though they're dealing kind of with similar things. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I'm excited to dive into some of the specifics of those things that really shine for you and what Maggie Gyllenhaal's kind of swinging for the fences on,
Yes,
and yeah,
absolutely.
and having that boldness. Sarah, what are your thoughts about The Bride and where did you land?
Yeah, I had a ton of fun with this. It is bold, it takes big swings, it is so creative, and I love a lot of those like creative choices that it makes. I also love, like you said, Sarah, like that homage to cinema and just this love letter to this medium that we all love. That's so much fun. And it is messy, it is clunky, it is overstuffed. There are parts of the story that I didn't love, that didn't felt needed, but I still had a lot of fun with this. So I think it's one of those movies where I'm like, I know it's flawed. I was experiencing that while in the theater, but I was still having a really fun time with this. So, yeah, even with all of its imperfections, I had a blast.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah,
one of the things that I had felt while I was watching it, because it was so chaotic and so messy and also flawed, I felt like I felt rattled at the end, but like my bones had been shaking out of my skin, but not like in a violent way, just in like it was so frenetic. And then I was just like, I feel like vibrations, like what just happened? And it was a wild ride, but it's like knowing I had a good time and I would maybe get on that roller coaster again, but also I need a break at the end.
I saw this movie at a theater that's connected to one of the like big malls in LA, and it was like a Saturday afternoon, and so I emerged out to like sunshine and like families having a Saturday out, like a peaceful little outing. I was just like, I think I need this right now. Because do y'all know what I just experienced? I'm like milling around outside of like Abercrombie Fitch with the family. So it's like, guys, I just experienced a lot. Y'all look too happy for this right now. Um, yeah, I think the bride definitely swings for the fences. And I feel like any creator, any artist that is willing to be this bold and somehow their ideas have gotten funded and we get to see it, it just I'm like gonna root for it. It reminds me of the way I feel a lot of times around Emerald Fennell films where I'm like, it doesn't always work for me, but she's doing something and she has something to say and it's fresh and she's breaking so many of the expectations that we come into a theater with and giving us something new and in a landscape that is so much tapping into nostalgia and sentimentality and kind of following a formula to create comfort. I loved being uncomfortable in The Bride. I would say the first third of the film really worked for me. And I was like, oh, this is going to be an incredibly juicy ride. And I feel like around the middle to ending section, we kind of take some turns, make some choices, and kind of run out of steam a little bit, or we're playing the same note again and again and again in the same tone, which I feel like didn't totally work for me. I kind of felt like fatigued towards the end, but also maybe that's part of the point. So I just wonder if we think about different variations of like the middle to ending sections and where we go with this story, this might have landed better for me. And all the ingredients are there. I loved the Mary Shelley possession sequences. That was probably my favorite. So all of that was so juicy and delicious, which I'm sure we'll talk about. All right, so spoiler alert for The Bride. It is available out in theaters. This is definitely like a theater going watch, I would say, as well. Like, go immerse yourself in this deranged, chaotic world and come out and touch grass after. There is a lot of, I think, very difficult subject matter and sensitive material as well. So, this is also your content warning for our conversation and also for the film as well. I think worth mentioning that it is quite jarring and it is quite emotional for maybe some. So, take care of yourselves. And with that, we will dive fully into some of the details of the bride. So, where shall we go first? What are some of the choices that the bride makes that really stood out to you?
Can we talk about the exclamation point in the title, just like right off the bat? Because I'll tell you what, I wasn't paying any attention to the fact that there was an exclamation point until after I'd watched it. And then suddenly realized everything has it. And I said, oh, I missed the mark myself, even going in. And it is so important because names are important in this movie. I'm wearing, again, my name's not Frankenstein t-shirt. I wore it when I was here last time. But our whole thing is this guy is not Frankenstein. This is Frankenstein's monster. But in this movie, his name is Frankenstein. And the movie that this is a remake of is The Bride of Frankenstein, which would really mean the human Dr. Frankenstein, right? So Maggie Gyllenhaal understands this. There's this whole sequence where the bride doesn't know her name. And that was always the thing that bothered me and frustrated me about however many retellings there have been of the original novel. The monster, the creature, doesn't have a name and nobody bothers with it at all. They don't do it in Guillermo del Toro's version. It's just a gaping hole, I think. But it's so much about mistaken identity. And so she has a name. He's telling her the name. And when he says Ginger, we know he's referring to Ginger Rogers. And then he says Penelope. And if we know, hopefully, where that name comes from, that is Odysseus's wife in the Odyssey. And it's supposed to be one of the greatest love stories ever, that he has been yearning to find her or to get back to her over 20 years, right? And she is like the ultimate beacon of hope for him. And so all of these components of names and names and names and names. And then she finally at the end says, I'm not going to be known by anything other than this, embracing that role that was handed to her without her consent, but she recognizes it as, now I can embody what I'm choosing, right? I'm choosing my path forward, even if so much of what came before was outside of my control. And so that exclamation point in the title is imperative in terms of understanding, I think, the whole vision for this movie.
Yeah, I loved that part when she was kind of like rattling through the names and she was like, not even the bride of Frankenstein. I am the bride. And I was like, yes, like that felt so satisfying for her to
Yes,
like reclaim that and like assert her identity and that she's not being identified in relation to her status to a man. And like that just
correct.
that felt so satisfying. I in my homework for seeing The Bride, I watched The Bride of Frankenstein the day before. And so it was very fresh in my mind. And so then to see this version where a lot of things do happen to the bride without her consent, but this consistent theme of her like asserting her agency was just so satisfying, especially given that she has no agency in The Bride of Frankenstein, the
Mm-hmm.
1930s film. So that felt like an important way to like retell this story and reshape this story. And I love that point that you made about the exclamation point being such an emphasis in that. I think it's also just a preview for how bonkers this film really
100%.
is and how bold it is. It is not quietly and demurely saying the bride. It is yelling the bride as loud as it possibly can. And so, which is also just satisfying.
Agree.
The exclamation points like, hey, you guys have been warned, okay? Like, we are shouting this from the rooftops. Nothing about this will be subtle and gentle and easy win. one of the things that I really love about the scene where she reclaims her identity for herself is that you see all of the men in her life and in her orbit, from her past life, from her current life, trying to use the different versions of her name to make her what they want her to be. And so when one of the men calls her Ida, it's like him trying to have her fit into the box of what she was to him then. And once again, to make her be their fantasy of what they need. And she rejects all of their suggestions essentially and claims it for herself. But I thought the power of a name being a sense of identity and also like a box almost to put her into that she rejects was a really powerful way to use the idea of a name as like an exclamation point on who you are. And it's neat to see that we see Frank receive his name too, that he is not Frankenstein, he is not the creature, he is not the monster, but he is called Frank at one point in the film. And that is someone claiming identity over him as well, or at least bestowing it upon him, whether he chooses to accept it or not. But
I think you said claiming his identity over him, or that's she's claiming him as her partner as well, right? She starts calling him Frank. She calls him Frankie. She's the one person who's not afraid. She never once recoils from him ever at all. She just, this is the way people look. And let's be honest, Christian Bale as Frankenstein is not bad to look at, which makes me uncomfortable. But that sharing of identities and sharing names, and it is something of like claiming ownership over someone or with someone or bonding with someone. And we know they're not going to get married because she fully rejects that notion, but them taking each other's names and actually using them and producing sound to those sorts of things does create this tangible bond between them, because Frank has never had a name, right? And she did have a name, but it serves no purpose for her because she's living other people's realities rather than her own.
one of the other, I think, interesting like intersecting storylines with our obviously our two main protagonists is uh Myrna Malloy and Penelope Cruz's whole role in this. She is delightful in anything that she is in. Um, at first, I was like, ah, this is it feels a little bit on the nose. Like, okay, we get it, you know. But I honestly, by the end of the film, I'm like, yeah, like show your badge, stick it to all the men that are around you, because um, the film expands when the bride becomes a figure and a symbol and no longer just a singular character that we're following. And I think the way that that has ripple effects throughout so many other parts of the film is kind of a fascinating, like these threads really begin to weave together. I'm curious your thoughts on Penelope Cruz's whole storyline as it relates to kind of the central storyline that we're following, that we're emotionally invested in. How did that work for you?
At first, I didn't like it. By the end of it, I had bought into it. This character is an homage to Myrna Loy's character Nora in the Thin Man series, where she's married to William Powell and he's the detective and she's the snappy little wifey who goes along with him. And the way that this movie subverts all of these things, this character of Myrna Malloy, which it is so obvious and I love it so much, that she fully takes over, right? You can tell in the background that she's got some ideas, she's got all of these hunches, and then it is fully acknowledged that she is smarter than everybody else, that she has more agency than women are typically given. Her being a female detective at the time would have been absolutely impossible, but we're living in this different world, right? And I'm going for it and I love it. I love that the detective seems so cute and sweet. I mean, that's Maggie Gyllenhaal's husband, right? But he's a flawed individual. He is not a knight in shining armor at all. He completely messes everything up, but he also takes himself out and he recognizes the women are here to do what needs to be done, and it's us men kind of who are messing it up. And so Penelope Cruz's character takes on the more like less symbolic components of what I think the bride represent the movie and the character represents overall, because she now is in law enforcement, in detective work. She's going to actually be the voice, hopefully find justice for all of these women who have been harmed and destroyed and silenced. And so she's like the literal component, the real world extension of what the bride symbolically is supposed to be, right? I again didn't like her character at the beginning, and by the end I was just like, yep, I'm into it, love it.
Yeah, I think I also struggled a little bit with the character. I mean, I'm here for a lady detective always. Like, yes, let's go. As a fan of murder mysteries, this is right up my alley. And so I liked a lot of what happened there. I didn't love, or maybe it's, I struggled to believe some of the stuff at the end, like when she's just like yelling and then everybody just stops shooting and I'm like, okay, and then they just like listen to her because she has a badge and I'm like, I want to believe that this is how this would work, but this is not how this would work. But I also think that the Peter Sarsgaard character is also really interesting. Again, I struggled with him throughout, but I think he's a really interesting character because he appears to be an ally, but then isn't. And it's this complexity that like we as human beings face, you know, where we're trying to be a better person and we're trying to make the right moves and all of these things, but we will mess up and we will make mistakes, and then how do we respond when that happens? So I appreciate the kind of like roller coaster ride that we go on with that character, who at times seems like a good guy and then sometimes is the worst, and then ultimately is able to like step back and like presumably do the right thing. So I like that complexity with that character, and Maggie Gyllenhaal didn't need to do that, but I appreciated that that complexity was introduced, that I think makes this character like worthwhile in the film. Whereas if he was more like black or white, maybe wouldn't have been as useful.
And that's one of the like themes throughout the film that I think was the most interesting, is how much there's characters that have the capacity to do the right thing or to not, and it's ultimately in them to choose which direction they go in. Even the like dissonance we feel watching like the bride and Frank figure out themselves too, like are we, they are monsters and they do terrible things, and yet you see immediately after like some of the big explosive moments, she's like, oh my god, did I just kill, you know? And that internal turmoil I think is so relatable for us as moviegoers, to feel that internal tension, that battle for, do we lean and indulge in the monstrous in us, or do we choose to do the right thing, even at the cost of ourselves? And you see not just these two characters wrestle with that, but so many of the others in their orbit as well. And that's contrasted with other characters we see in the society that are truly just corrupt. And it feels like that internal wrestling has now quieted, and they have just fully committed to their life of crime, of power, of, you know, whatnot. But we get that glimpse too, and so we can't help but root for these like very flawed characters, but at least they're still wrestling, you know, compared to the Lupinos and the others that are truly just committed to their life of crime.
Yeah,
Well,
there's still some like humanity in these like quote unquote monsters, and this film is not shy about showing us them in all of their messy humanness.
Well, and that's part of what is interesting about this film and its references to other films and this time period. It takes place in 1936. It starts out in Chicago, which was basically this den of crime at the time. My dad and I joke all the time on our show about how Chicago needs a different PR person because in the 20s and 30s, they were just Chicago was a cesspool of crime. This is also a time where gangsters were revered in the media. And so there are these echoes of Bonnie and Clyde, for example, who were real people who were actually at this time being lauded by the public, not necessarily by the media, but the public ate up all of this type of stuff. There were people running through the streets in the same way that all these women are dressing up as the bride. And let me tell you, people are in real life are going to be doing that and getting tattoos and all of that type of stuff. That is a real thing that people were doing at the time because of the sort of desperation that people were feeling related to the stock market crash, the depression, and feeling this sort of vicarious catharsis through watching people be involved in crime. And they would sometimes spin it as, oh, this is really like Robin Hood type of stuff, rather than, no, this is very black and white, like this is crime. And so them going to New York, another den of crime and corruption, it is all happening in this sort of bubble world, right, of crime and violence and rage. And yes, Frank and the bride are caught up in it. Frank does the same thing that the bride does when he freaks out and stomps somebody's face into the curb. I was not prepared for that. In fact, the last time I saw that was in American History X many years ago, and if I think about it too much, I want to vomit. So, yes, big warning. He also is like, I can't believe that I did that. Right? Who am I? That's not who I am. We see him dancing and fantasizing and all of these types of things. And so there's this constant push pull, as you've said, among all of the characters, especially our leads, and especially the bride. Now, here's a question that I have for you both, because Jen, you said that you really liked the Mary possession stuff. I loved the framing. I loved the beginning. I was so into it. I was kind of like, okay, I'm just going to go with it during her initial possession in the speakeasy or whatever is going on. As a thread throughout the movie,
Does it make any sense?
Yeah,
It
that's,
doesn't.
and I was like,
it doesn't make any sense.
I loved it, and yet I was like, this is a waste. I wanted more Mary narration framing. I liked that. I would have liked maybe some crazy narrative going on. I don't know, but it was hard for me to be like, the bride is her own person, but if she's just possessed, if this is a supernatural component and not like a science fiction component, I struggled with that a lot, but liked it in theory. But I hated it, but I liked it. I don't know.
No, the entire movie, I was trying to work that out in my head and I didn't successfully arrive at it by the end of the movie. So it's just like, this just is really cool in concept. They didn't really go with it. Actually, one of my desires of the film is to have seen more of how it's positioned initially to be like Mary Shelley possession, but I actually think there's something deeper there around like those dark voices in your head that like coax you to do the thing that
Sure.
you maybe in your right mind would never do, but there's something that ignites, whether it's like rage at the corruption of the world, whether it's being continuously like put down and oppressed again and again, and there's something that just like lights the fire for all of that. I think that would have been neat to see how that like builds and intensifies over time as the bride is continually experiencing things in the real world, and we get more of that goading from that voice, that Mary Shelley voice. That would have been, I think, really fun. I also alternatively would find it really fascinating to see the bride almost like reject and conquer the voice, or like to battle with the voice in an interesting way, where like that voice is controlling her, but then she actually transcends the voice and it's like, I don't need you anymore because I have now fully realized and become the bride, you know? There's something there that I think would have been interesting. And so then the Mary Shelley voice has to find someone new to inhabit. And so maybe it's Dr. Euphonius or something like that. But kind of the wrestling with the voice would have been neat too. Because I think that idea of like that dark voice in your head that is just constantly goading you or like speaking those things about you to yourself is a fascinating concept. I don't even think it needs to be Mary Shelley, to be honest. I think just make it a voice that Jessie Buckley just delivers a delicious performance on would have been enough for me too. Actually, the Mary Shelley of it all doesn't actually add too much for me.
It actually could totally be a side effect of being reanimated, right? That it
Yeah,
messes with the
yeah.
brain and she's like, maybe she remembers something, but she knows that the voice isn't necessarily normal. But here's the weird thing about the Mary Shelley possession. And Sarah, I know you can back me up on this because you read the novel. Mary Shelley never wrote a bride character. Frankenstein's monster goes and asks Frankenstein to make him a companion, and Frankenstein says absolutely not, and he only complies when the monster threatens his entire family. And then Frankenstein actually destroys the bride that he is making. So there's never actually a character that embodies any of this type of stuff. So the Mary Shelley possession thing seems to be raging against this silencing of women's voices, and yet Mary Shelley never gave a tangible body to women's silenced voices. She has the monster kill the only female character in the novel. So I appreciated, I think, the concept of unsilencing people, and yet as much as we're trying to revere this author, she didn't do it either.
Yeah, yeah. I think I mean, obviously in the Bride of Frankenstein, it starts with Mary Shelley, you know, and the boys, and she's telling this new story that is then the Bride of Frankenstein. So I I think that's probably where it's coming from and just like updated to be spookier and scarier and wilder and all of those things. But I just like you guys, I wish that it went somewhere. It's really cool. It looks cool. Jessie Buckley is incredible, so it sounds cool. She does a great job at it, but like why are we doing this? Like it just doesn't land very well. So I think that there's some ways that it could have really like reinforced or honestly just been eliminated. And because Jessie Buckley as just the bride is enough. Like she is fascinating. She is so much fun to watch. We didn't need this extra component, I don't think. So I I read it as just an homage to the 1930s film, but if that's all it is, like we didn't need it.
Agreed. I totally agree. What did you guys think realizing that this was a musical? Jen.
Honestly, I was getting flashbacks to a movie that I did not enjoy, which is the Joker film with Lady Gaga and I forget who else is in it, but I was really scared at one point in this film where I was like, "Oh no, we cannot do that movie again, please." um, Again, I think it's an interesting creative choice. It did not work for me personally. Um, there's some sequences where it just kind of took me out and I was like, oh, we're doing a cool thing. I'm glad we're doing a cool thing. I love that we're trying to do cool things that are fresh and exciting. But the tones kind of like I don't know, it didn't really land for me. I was like, okay, I can't wait for this to be over so that we can continue on with the story. But I do I love the creative choice to like try and mix tones together in an interesting way. So I can appreciate it at like a swing for the fences, but I was like, I'm distracted now by the dancing. We're doing like uh, the dance off sequence too. I was like, okay, I can see how this could work, but I don't know why it's not working for me. But how did it land for both of you? Did it work a little bit better than it did for me?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about it. I think some of it was really successful, and I think it's fun to imagine Frankenstein's monster as somebody who loves the cinema and loves to dance and just has this really like whimsical heart. I don't know. I like that juxtaposition and I find that really interesting. I think the scenes like when they crash the really fancy party and everybody's dancing, I that didn't really work for me, though I really appreciated the craft of it all, and like I want to know more about how that was like choreographed and all of that to like be period appropriate but also be of this kind of like deranged mind at the same time. So like the craft of it I really loved. And my favorite part of the dancing is the homage to the great film Young Frankenstein, where he does Puttin' on the Ritz. And that just warmed my whole heart. So I will take all of the musical and dancing scenes that didn't work for me because they included that. I am satisfied.
Sarah, I thought of you immediately. I was like, there was little preludes to it leading up to it, and I was like, are they gonna do it? Are they gonna do it? Sarah's gonna love this. And then it full on happened, and it seriously was like, touchdown, got it, we got it, it's here in the bag, and it was so overt. I loved it too. So I was absolutely thinking about you, knowing that you love that movie as well, and it was so cheesy and so over the top, and I loved it, as silly as all of that was. Dance sequences as a whole, yeah, I was like, I get it. Maybe we focused a little bit too much on tap dancing Fred Astaire character, but whatever. She's throwing her brother a role, right? Which I like that it's a whole family affair. So I will let it slide.
Well, and when your whole family is that talented,
Yeah,
like
come on.
sure,
Put
yes,
them in
get
there.
your brother in here, get your husband in here. We're having a great time.
Absolutely.
I really loved in that sequence though the like lighting change that seemed to happen. It's almost like we like got whisked off into a whimsical space and then came back down to earth. This and it partially works because this is the fulfillment of Frank's dream, his desires that he'd been watching on the big screen, presumably for years and decades, his whole life, just like wishing he could be that male protagonist in the suit with the girl getting to dance. So, I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts around the kind of love letter to cinema, as you mentioned, Sarah, because that dance sequence actually feels like a fulfillment for Frank of this dream that he finally got to have.
So there are actually in that, and I think it's particularly in that big main sequence that happens at the party, they are using actual footage from movie musicals of the time. So there's footage in there from 42nd Street and Gold Diggers of 1933, or maybe it's only Gold Diggers of 1933, but like the Busby Berkeley sort of kaleidoscope stuff, where they have very artfully put Christian Bale's character in the middle of what is actually real footage from the time. And clearly the filmmakers know these movies and love these movies and are crafting all of these components with such love and with such care. And Frank's character being obsessed with cinema, as you say, that he's been watching these over and over again and wants to be this dashing leading man. One of the things that happens in the novel or the stories that kind of gets talked about with Guillermo del Toro's version is that Frank does so much reading and he educates himself and he becomes obsessed with literature and identifying with different characters in literature, from Adam, the first man, to The Sorrows of Young Werther, where you have a young man who has unrequited love and commits suicide. And then it makes sense that if he's been alive for 100 years or more, that would gradually translate into film, right? And that he would have already experienced all of silent cinema, which would have had lots of references to the grotesque and the monstrous. The chandelier coming down is more of a modern interpretation of the Phantom of the Opera, but that was a silent film with Lon Chaney. And so you have absolutely this obsessive component where he is going to the movies over and over and over again. And it seems a little bit like serial killer thing, like he's got to do the thing to do the thing. But it makes sense in terms of his character, that this is like his little anchor, or the thing that kind of keeps him tied down in all of the storm. And they're using film history as a way to, I think, try to ground the audience, even without them knowing all of the references necessarily that they're drawing from so many things. I even went and looked up, I'm like, wait, did drive-in movie theaters actually exist back then? Yeah, they like, the first big commercial one came out in like 1933. And I was like, oh, today I learned something, right? So I don't know, there's just so many good things that are going on with all of these references. And one of my favorite things is at the beginning where they're in the speakeasy before she becomes, it's like one of the first lines, before she becomes possessed. And somebody says, how do you know in a film um, that oh, now I can't remember what the phrase was. I should have written it down. It was something like, how do you know a woman is getting paid as much of a man as a man, or to do a man's work, or whatever? And the reference is Una Merkel, who plays the maid in The Bride of Frankenstein and was this character actress in all of these movies at the time, and things like that. And I wish that there were more people who were going to know what that means, because it's going to get lost over time. Like, people watching this movie aren't going to understand the reference at all, but then people already don't know that reference, and it breaks my heart. But that's neither here nor there. That's just a passing thought I had.
But it's a good thought, and it's part of the reason why you and your dad are doing your project
That's
and your
true.
show. You're helping to educate the masses.
Hopefully.
No, but I also loved all of those nods to movies, and I think it's gonna sound so silly to say, but like when Frank is constantly returning to the theater, I feel like that's just a point of empathy, you know, because I'm like, when I'm having a bad day, what do I want to do? I want to go watch one of my favorite movies. Like, it's such a human reaction to try and like find comfort or enjoyment or distraction or whatever in movies. And that's just what we do. Today we usually just plop on the couch and throw something on. But I loved that inclusion for, you know, all the film history and the film buffs, and that's really fun. But I also think that it helps us empathize with this character that in every other adaptation, or at least most of the other adaptations, we're supposed to fear and see as the other. And I feel like that is a very like easy way for us to empathize and almost see ourselves in this character instead of othering him.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, and I think it also touches on this dynamic that films and media and TV and all the art we consume like shape our desires in really powerful ways too. And it's because as we are living and forming, and especially when we are in our younger years, like we don't know what to want, we don't know who we are, and so we only know to superimpose ourselves and try on these different ideas of ourselves through film. And so the fact that he is literally, when he sees the screen, he sees his own face on the protagonist in the film, is kind of exactly what we do. We just might not realize it. And there's a fun like nod to Buster Keaton and him like entering into the film world, you know. But in a very literal way, like we do that exact same thing. And because Frank's character and the creature is like also like kind of meant to be like a childlike character where he doesn't know who he is and he's still figuring out who he is and defining who he is. If this is what he's consuming, this is going to shape how he like exists in the world. And so we see that his desire, his primary desire, is to have a companion. Partially that's human, but partially everything he's seen on screen is like, this is the pinnacle of joy and connection as a human, is to like fall in love and get to dance at a party with the hot girl that you love. And so that's what he wants. And that's what he gets to live out. And so I think that's really neat to see the way the film's commenting on like the power of this medium to shape our desires while reflecting our desires as well.
100%. He's buying into the message of big band dancing,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
He's imitating what what he sees as an example, right? And we all do that as well. So not only do we put ourselves into movies or stories that we're reading or whatever it is, we try to copy what we see over and over again, whether that's through our parents or our experiences in childhood or whatever. And
Mm.
since this is the only sort of connection that he gets because people are so repulsed by his appearance. And I love that he keeps his face covered and all of that type of stuff. It lends to some mystery and kind of showing this is how he can function in this
Mm.
world and still be alive all of this time later. We'll also be like, okay, you have a festering wound, does that hurt? And he's like, I don't know, I'm used to it, right? Like right, does it hurt? I don't know. uh, okay. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the makeup in this movie was great. I thought Christian Bale looked great. I think Jessie Buckley and that whole design of her character with the
Yes.
wild hair, it's different and yet it still feels like the original character. The splotch across the face, which makes her look so unique and yet is still an homage to the original character just in terms of color. And Annette Bening looks amazing. Everybody looked so good in this film, even when they weren't necessarily supposed to be attractive, right? I just
Mm.
really appreciated sort of the detail of all of the costume choices, makeup, lighting, all of that type of stuff. I thought was excellent.
I agree. I think stylistically, this film does an incredible job. Like there's a clear vision. Even the color palette, I remember noticing at the beginning of the film, like so much more orange and greens, which I feel like is a very different look from a lot of films that tend to lean in, I don't know, the cool blues we seem to love these days, like there's a very clear atmospheric like vibe that is established visually from the very beginning. Her dress is like a satin orange dress. I love the top buttons always unbuttoned too. It like gives her this like disheveled, like, I don't really care, but I'm also going to be in a satin dress throughout the entire film. Those red boots, like, there's just so much attention to like the stylistic choices that I think really worked too. Yeah.
And can we also just talk about the performances? Because there's a lot going on in this film, but the performances in this are also just like top notch.
Agreed. Right off the bat, I will say I liked seeing Christian Bale in an like semi comedic role, right? That he's getting to have a little bit of fun. He's getting to dance around and giggle and laugh. And it's not that he's never done those things, but it kind of reminded me of Newsies a little bit. And I appreciated this different. I think of him as being so serious and but also a different kind of unhinged, like Patrick Bateman in American Psycho, which is on a totally different level. This kind of feels similar to that in a way, but not quite. It's him doing a completely different character. And I love that this take on that character is different than what we've already seen, right? To have these two movies so released so close in time together. It's like the movie Ants and A Bug Life coming out at the same time. Um, I think it was a subdued performance from him, but I loved it. And I also loved that he doesn't talk a ton other than at the beginning. It's a face performance, like a silent movie performance. And then I don't know, Jessie Buckley, you guys talk about her because I was just like, holy moly, I am desperately in love with her now, but also I'm terrified of her.
Well, really quickly, I want to like piggyback on what you were saying about Christian Bale because I think what really impressed me about his performance is that we understand who Franks is. We understand his desperate loneliness, and he never steals the limelight away from Jessie Buckley ever. And he is giving a tremendous performance, but it's all in support of her. And I thought that that was really, really impressive because he's a great actor. We know that. We've seen it. He's great in this, but it's such a subtle and subdued performance that I think really helps to enhance. Jessie Buckley is incredible, obviously, but everything that he is doing enhances what she is doing, I think. And he never steals the stage from her. And I don't know. I was just blown away by that.
And it feels like he properly understands that his role in this film is to be in awe of her. And like that is right for the character and that is also right for the film too, which is that we, like him, are also just like, oh my God, I am caught up in the tornado that is Jesse Buckley as the bride. And he knows that like the more he is just he's like basically in defined in relationship to her. Like every scene, he's just you feel him just like waiting and watching to see like what she's gonna do next and knowing how to like fit into the gaps of that. And I think that is so right for this movie as well. Because Jessie Buckley, my gosh, is been doing incredible work for the past several years, but I think she is like having her like she is operating on all cylinders in like every performance that she's giving and she's so intentional about choosing which roles to take that her being in this I think added a lot of intrigue for me because I know that she only works with and is in roles that like really have a lot to say and are kind of breaking outside of the molds of what exists today. And this, I couldn't imagine anybody else playing the bride in the way that she does because she adds obviously all of the deranged like chaos of it, but there's like a deliciousness in her way of delivering the language in that's written into her role, the vocabulary and the pacing of that, that reminds me of what we often talk about with like great Shakespearean actors is like they understand the language enough to know how to deliver it. And it felt like that was happening with every line that she was giving, that she has studied and knows when to pause, when to emphasize, and allow the language to shine, which I think her vocabulary and her like construction of sentences in this film is a whole character in and of itself. And she brings that to life in a way that feels accessible to us. And we lean in with like while still feeling very breathless listening to her speak throughout this film.
Yeah, and this coming on the heels of Hamnet, I think is also kind of insane. Like these two roles could not be more different. And man, the same actress playing these two roles, it just we all know that she's fantastic, but I think especially seeing these almost back to back, I don't know, I'm like doubly impressed by her.
And I think they have such good chemistry and they're able to convey it just with their eyes, right? And part of what you were saying, Jen, where Christian Bale has this more subdued performance and he doesn't take away, we don't expect this is like a supporting role. Basically, he is just there, sort of almost as scenery for a lot of the film. But I like that there are these little things that were put in there that we are watching him watch her, and he is just agog winking at her when she kind of said, I prefer not to, or throws stuff on the floor. He's enraptured with that and loves that she is, it's kind of manic pixie dream girl a little bit, but we see him falling in love with her, therefore we fall in love with her, and she is in love with the world while also being angry at everything that she encounters. And it blows me away to kind of think about her, Jessie Buckley, as a human being planning out how am I going to approach essentially these two roles, right, that she's playing in this one film, but really one person with just multiple facades or facets or whatever we want to call it. But I think that all of the performances in this film, no matter who it is somehow chewing up the scenery and yet simultaneously being very calm, right? Annette Bening's character seems over the top. She is a mad scientist. He even says that, aren't you a mad scientist? But she's also prim and proper. And I love how everything feels strained and tense, like it's going to burst at the seams at any moment, and yet it doesn't. And certainly there are crazy, frenetic, eye popping sequences, but so much of the other stuff is just like, and it's only because some of these performances are more on the subtle side rather than big and obvious.
And I think that you need that in a film like this too, because there's obviously the bride is such a big character, and everything that they do is so big and so in your face. The cinematography, the lighting, like all of these, like they're big, bold, creative choices. And so if all of the characters were larger than life, it would almost be like too much. But I think the fact that so many of the other characters are stable, normal, grounded, even the mad scientist being grounded, I think helps us feel grounded in a film like this that is so wild and over the top. So it's absolutely necessary that we have that balance, because I think if it were bigger, it would be easier for us as the audience to just like check out. Like, oh, this is too much for me. Nope, I'm not doing this. But I think some of those subtleties like help us catch a breath after like a really big explosive scene. So that balance I think is really important. And all of those characters serve a really important performance, and all of the actors understood the assignment and did what they needed to do really, really well.
I would say that one of my complaints, Jen, kind of going off of what you say about the Shakespearean components, right? The skill and talent with delivering these lines, this vocabulary, how Jessie Buckley clearly knows how to use words in her mouth. My one complaint that I had just in terms of filmmaking overall, I had some trouble with the sound. And I don't know if this is because I'm an old crone now or whatever, but so much of it, because there's these conflicting accents, right? You've got Frank has one kind of accent, the gangsters have another accent, Jessie Buckley has 15 accents, whatever it is. And some of the messages got garbled for me in terms of being able to truly understand what was going on. And I kept thinking, I want to have subtitles, which seems to be my crutch that I use all of the time. And I'm looking forward to watching it again so that I can have hopefully accurate subtitles with what's going on. I misheard names for a while with some of the extra characters, or what the detective was doing and how they knew each other and stuff when all of that was coming out, because it was just blah, 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 blah. And some of it was so loud, I struggled with it. So I would say overall, the sound design not great. The acting performances superb, but didn't necessarily get as pristine um, sounding, I guess, as it could have been for me.
Yeah, actually, I had that thought too, but then I thought it was just me too as well. It's actually pretty early in the film. It's when she's about to get pushed down the stairs in
Mm-hmm.
the opening scene. And she is delivering so much delicious goodness that I was like, wait, I want to hold on. I can't hear, because I think there was like a really big, like the score is really like strong in that moment, because obviously it's a very dramatic, violent moment. But I kept thinking like, I can't wait to like watch this again or just be able to read the screenplay, because everything she's saying of what I could catch was so good, but I would catch like every third sentence sometimes and be like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh,
Mm-hmm.
that was really good. But I thought I was just also maybe tired and not able to track with the film as much. But I remember being like, hold on, the score, just a little bit. I want to hear her speak like the delicious lines that were written by the screenwriters that were so well done. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Agree.
Okay, any other last thoughts about the bride? The bride! Exclamation point. Uh, before we wrap, some shout outs, nitpicks, qualms, praises.
I suddenly had a thought about the swimming pool, and I feel like I thought this at the time, and I was like, that's something there, remember it because you'll mention it when you're talking about it because it's really juicy, and now I don't know what it is, so I'm throwing it out there so that like tomorrow at like 3 a.m. I can wake up screaming and being like, oh, this is what I should have said, because there was something about it that felt tied to something else, and I can't, and it's going to drive me nuts. But there you go, that's my nugget, something important about the pool.
Okay, excellent. When you remember at 3 a.m., please be sure to let us know, because now I need to know what was going on with the swimming pool that was important.
I don't know.
Milestone stories. PSA: the swimming pool mystery has been solved. Here it is, folks.
You're like, no, it looked cool. That's it. That's all it was.
Yeah.
My shout out that I would like to give is to the choice to use Monster Mash as the soundtrack to the ending credits. It was literally perfect. I was so pleased. I was just tickled in my seat, singing along to Monster Mash,
Yeah.
having a great time. So I love that choice. And I feel like it's so indicative of this film, too, that is just having so much fun to end with this song. Of all songs, it was perfect.
100% agree. And side note, I once had a student of mine, this was a long time ago, used the term monster mash as a euphemism for sex, because they were trying to be like very demure and polite. And so that song came on, and I was like, and we literally just saw the monsters have sex. Yeah. Oh, it's so cute. It's their love song. I thought it was great too.
It's so good. More evidence to include in that thesis. I mean, it was.
Yep. There you go.
There were people in my theater literally dancing to that. The ending sequence when the lights came on. Yeah, I had quite a active group. I also just find it so interesting when a film is so captivating that the audience gets sucked in. There's a point where I think the bride is saying something fabulous, and they just start clapping, like in agreement, back to the film, and I'm like, that is the power of cinema right there. It's like, yes, whatever they said like hit so hard that like instinctual response was break out in applause.
I think it's so easy for us to forget that
Yeah.
cinema is supposed to be a communal experience. Right? Post COVID, where we're all just staying home all the time. And, people argue did cinema start dying? But there's all of these pushes to like get people back into theaters. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
And yes, please go see movies in the theaters, but recognize that you're going to have a different experience with other people there, and not just the annoying shut up, why are you talking experiences, but you're feeling people react who may react differently than you, but also helps you to react. Yeah. And that experience as an audience together, and then people dancing at the end, how adorable is that gasping jump scares, when people finally fall into each other's arms, whatever it is, that is the power of cinema. So while we're watching Frank watch movies and be sucked in, we also need to allow ourselves to do the same things instead of just staying at home and watching on our small screens. Part of the reason to see it on a big screen is not only because that's the way that it was created, but because it creates that sense of community that cannot be replicated even just watching stuff with your friends, right?
Wow. That is my instinctual response. It's just like, that was so well said. I love it. That is a manifesto for the masses. So good. Okay, well, I think that is the perfect note to end our episode and wrap our episode on the bride. Go watch it in theaters. Take people that you think would have a great time with this. I also think that like as intense and deranged this film is, like it's a lot of fun too, and like letting the fun be had, because it can be very, very intense at times, but it also is a film that's like not really taking itself too seriously too. At the end of the day, the ending credits is Monster Mash, like it knows what it is. And I'm also just intrigued to see what Maggie Gyllenhaal does next. Swinging for the fences, we need more female film creators, directors, that have like clarity and vision and are like kind of unafraid and bold and fearless to go do it in the industry right now. So this is very exciting for the state of cinema right now. All right. Well, this was our episode and discussion about The Bride. Thank you so much, Sara, for joining us. And it's just always a delight, but just so many fascinating takes and thoughts and insights that you've shared. So we appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much for having me back. I can't wait for the next time, hopefully, that I get to come back. I love being able to see new things in theaters because my show is not that at all. Sometimes we do episodes about movies that no longer exist. So we can't even watch the movies that we talk about. So I just so love that your show has actually helped me get back into going to see current movies. The anticipation of, I can't wait for this movie to come out. I'm going to go see it as soon as possible. I'm going to go talk about it with my friends, Jen and Sarah. And then that gets to get shared with our other friends. And love of cinema and love of movies is what all of this is about. And we fulfill all of these different options and facets for people. And I just love being a part of your community. And I love it so much. So thank you.
We are so grateful. We are so grateful. And yeah, it's so cool also seeing how the things that you love and have invested in for so many years get to like shine in these very unique perspectives that you bring, like being an English teacher, being a lover of classic literature, being a lover of classic cinema. And I'm like, I would have never thought about that dimension of this thing or noticed that thing. So that sharing together is so special. And then we just also get to be silly and ridiculous together,
Yes.
which is always the best. That is the best. Sara, where can people find more of your show? This really special project that you're actually getting to do together with your father.
Yeah.
Tell people more about it. Yeah.
So my show is Shea Cinema. I do it with my father, William Shea, and we are watching in chronological order all of the films nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture, and that started back in 1927. We are just about to record our season finale for season 6, which is the 6th Academy Award, so that's up to the end of 1933. We took a little bit of a hiatus. We're trying to get things back on track. Our next episode will be out soon, and that will be on the musical 42nd Street with our good friend Clarissa as a guest. Then we're going to essentially close out the year. We have several other episodes, including one with Tom Duncan came on to talk with us about Little Women of all movies. I've been guesting on tons of other shows. I'm in the process of starting another piece of content with another individual that we all know, hopefully on a regular basis. So we'll have to see what that is like. Can't say too much more about that right now, but putting some feelers out there, and hopefully I can get us back on track. Dad is like ready to do all of the things. He did tell me yesterday, like he's ready to see The Bride. He like wants to go and is like on it. And I know he loved being able to share his little recording for the end of the year. So thank you so much for including us on that as well. You guys just create such a wonderful, warm, welcoming environment, and we are blessed to be part of it. So
honestly, we were like, we're so lucky we got to have Papa Shea on that episode. You're like, we're figuring it out, blah, blah. You're like, I think we can make it happen. We were like, yes.
Well, that's the first collab he's ever done, which is a huge, huge big deal. And then last week, we were invited onto Best Picture Cast to talk about The Broadway Melody, which is from 1929. So that was his very first regular guest appearance. So that's going to be coming out soon. So adorable, y'all. Like, so cute. So, yeah.
I can't wait.
So many things.
That is so exciting. We will include links to all of where you can find Shea Cinema, more of Sara, more of her pops, just an incredible duo, and where you can follow more in the show notes. So all of that, go check them out. Okay, well, we will be back soon with more film reviews and all that goodness on the feed. We hope everyone has an amazing week, and go watch Bright out in theaters. All right, bye, y'all. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Movies and Us. We are part of the Movie Archer podcast network, so check out moviearcher.com to learn more.
Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories.
You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating review letting us know your thoughts about today's episode.
Connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at moviesandUsPod, or email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. Check out our website, andusmedia.co, for the latest on Movies and Us and our other podcast, TV and Us.
We hope you have an amazing week, and we can't wait to see y'all very soon.